Hello, it's me and JT again. And this is a new kind of video that we're going to try out and hopefully make a bit of a series of where we watch some movies of a certain type or in a certain sort of theme and then talk about them for a minute. And the one we're doing first is one that we've referred to a lot and that me and JT both have an interest in, which is 70s conspiracy movies. The 70s, of course, were a wonderful time for conspiracy theories because it was when a lot of Americans were becoming aware of the fact that they of what it meant to live in a post-World War II superpower that had an intelligence state as large as ours.
I mean, I think that the paranoid political thriller really pops off post,
and of course Nixon. Shit.
Yeah, Nixon, Watergate, Kennedy.
General awareness of government corruption.
Yeah, general awareness of government
and
corruption
alongside, yeah, of course, Vietnam. So there's an awareness of imperialism as well, American imperialism that hadn't been there because Vietnam was being broadcast into people's televisions, as well as deteriorating social conditions and economic conditions at the onset of neoliberalism in the 70s and the economic crisis of the 70s that brought forth the deindustrialization that we now live in the aftermath of, which is one of many reasons why I think 70s conspiracy movies are interesting as a time in culture, a feature of culture.
It's I don't know, one of the last, I feel big times where I think that there are movies generally critical of government. I mean, I think there's in the 80s, obviously, I think a great deal of critique of conservative culture, but I feel they're less politically explicit as some of these movies are.
Yeah.
And into the 90s too. But just I don't know. There's very little of political American cinema. And I think that with this little blip with the 70s conspiracy thriller that emerges is the closest we get to some a mainstream thing engaging with politics. And I think even though a lot of them are on a loosely left or at least a suspicious of the governmental powers, I don't know, their success politically is to varying degrees and I think a lot of them that are on the weaker end are less politically coherent, and I think that makes them kind of worse. I mean, not to say there are good versions of them that aren't that sort of mix their message, I think. But when so much of this genre is tied to political meaning, I think it does matter a little bit more than just a regular blockbuster or regular movie.
Yeah.
That it sort of sinks the landing with its politics.
So I guess let's say first off, just so we can refer to them when we want to, what movies we watched. As always, when you talk about decades culturally, you're not confined to just the actual years of the decade. It's a little bit before and a little bit after, so we have some of that. So yeah, Z, which is from 1969, The China Syndrome.
Okay, yeah, Z, China Syndrome, all right.
Then Executive Action, Soylent Green, 3 Days of the Condor, Capricorn One, Ninth Configuration, and Missing. Those are the ones we watched for this. And that takes us from 1969 to 1982, bookended by two Costa Gavras films. Just to start it out, which of these do you think is the best example and it can be a couple of them. What are the best examples of this genre? Best in terms of they best exemplify the genre, or they're good as movies. Whatever you want.
I think at like what I alluded to beforehand was the Costa Gavras movies Z and Missing.
Yeah,
I think are the best. Like
yeah. I think we
these
both
are
liked those the most of
these
the
are
ones we
the only
watched.
two films of his filmography that I've seen, but it
Yeah,
seems to be like a particular like the political thriller is a particular fascination of his, and
yeah,
like it does it really well. Z and Missing are very different in terms of both like the style and the story they're telling, but I think they understand the nature of like unraveling conspiracy and like the paranoia that is involved with it in like a compelling way. Like I think um especially like finishing off Missing recently, what Gavras does really well is like presenting like memory and like what how it could be manipulated or
yeah,
like um uh fake. And I think in Missing he does that where it's like Sissy Spacek and Jack Lemmon talking to this elderly couple about Sissy Spacek's missing husband, Jack Lemmon's son, and they're like talking about like what did it look like, what was the scene when he was like taken by the army, like was it just like some army guys like putting him in a regular truck, or they putting him in a military truck, and it presents that like very neatly where it like
yeah.
sort of fades that in and out.
And they complement each other very well, the two movies, because
Yeah.
Z is about sort of the growing, a growing right wing sort of military and police alliance against a left wing political organization. Whereas Missing is the immediate aftermath of a right wing coup, specifically
Hmm.
the very infamous one in Chile, which is one particular reason I think Missing is very interesting, is because it isn't just about any right wing coup, it is a real guy in a real coup, and it is like one of the defining coups of US imperialism. It is, I know that last year, when big protests started back up in Chile recently, I remember seeing a sign from one of the protesters that said, "Neoliberalism was born in Chile and will die in Chile." And so
Yeah.
it's a very important, I think, historically event to have a movie around. And to that end, one of the reasons I think both of us really like 70s conspiracy movies is that not only do you have pop culture that is critical of government, but pop culture that like was like pretty popular, like actually had big actors like Jack Lemmon in it.
Hmm.
Um, and some of the other movies that we're going to talk about, like China Syndrome was a pretty big movie, obviously was helped by the fact that it came out like 2 seconds after 3 Mile Island. Um,
That's so funny that it was like I was talking to a friend of mine who recently watched it just like 2 days ago,
yeah.
and they're like raving about it and had a great time with China Syndrome. But we're like, yeah, it's crazy that it like literally was in production before that happening, and
Yeah.
like they directly reference I think 3 Mile Island in that, and it's like
Yeah.
it happened like so quickly after. To go off into like different territory, I think
Yeah.
China was one that I would probably say is like my second favorites out of the Gavras.
Yeah. I like that one.
No, I do think in the landing, I feel like it at the end it is a little bit more optimistic. I think
Yeah.
what Z and Missing get really well is that it's like really bitter and sad
Oh,
at
the
the end.
end of both movies are what really like twists the knife, so to speak.
I don't know. There's no way where you get a happy ending and resolution.
If
And
you're
while
being
China,
honest about it, no.
yeah, China Syndrome a little bit does because I think there's like that reclaiming where it's like, I mean, it is bleak in the sense that like Jack Lemmon gets like suicided. Well, not suicided, but gets murdered by the police.
Right.
Um,
I forgot that Jack Lemmon is in two of the movies we watched. Huh?
yeah, and he phenomenal performances in
Oh,
both.
he's a king in both of them. I mean, Jack Lemmon is a god. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
go on.
when he's murdered in China Syndrome, there's like a little bit of that. One of his coworkers like speaking out to the media
Right.
after it happening, and like the company trying to like press him down and be like, "Look, like this is serious."
Yeah.
And he had like he wasn't a crazy guy or whatever, and it's like that like is like that kind of like started me a little bit, but it's hopeful, not necessarily like it doesn't mean anything in broadly will it actually change things
Right. That is a weakness with some conspiracy movies. The ones that even if they don't necessarily end hopefully, um they're the ones that sincerely believe that like exposing the truth is going to do anything
yeah.
when that really isn't very often the case with this kind of thing in real life. And I was worried that it was going in that direction at first with Missing. I was when he's at the airport and he's like, "I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna sue all of you." And he says the line, "I'm just glad that we still live in a country where we can put people like you in jail." And I was like, that's like kind of lame because America,
But it's like
of course, people do this all the fucking time and never go to jail. But then right after that, you get the narration that just says, "Yeah, the lawsuit didn't fucking do anything." Like,
yeah, no, I mean that's the thing is
they
like
sent the body too late to do an autopsy, and then by that time the like statute of limitations went away, so it was just dismissed. Like just the again, like most banal way it could end possible, especially right after the scene right before that, right after they've found out that he was murdered by the military, that they have to pay a fee to transport the body,
yeah,
that
shit
they
is
have to
so
pay
fucked
for
up.
it. Like that kind of, and that's why that kind of stuff is why those, I think those two movies are the strongest. And I do like China Syndrome for a similar reason. And I noted that on Letterboxd, I think I rated it higher than you. But I did want to mention it while we're talking about ones we liked, is Ninth Configuration. I thought was pretty good.
Oh yeah, I like you did rate it higher than me, but I do really like parts of Ninth Configuration.
There are
I
things
wonder
about it that I like.
I want to
Yeah.
rewatch it more. I mean, I liked it, but I think it like and in general, I feel like there's a thing about 70s movies. I think there are a few of the conspiracy theory things that we watch that I'm not like head over heels about. Executive
No.
action is like actively
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, we were
But
both pretty stinky on that one, but we'll get to it.
but Ninth Configuration I liked in the sense that it was the most like pinch on and
Yeah.
like hot on the heels of like reading like Gravity's Rainbow, like like the initial set piece of like a like secluded like base in the woods where these people these soldiers post Vietnam are living out like just complete deranged insanity
Yeah.
because of psychological damage they faced during the war. The way it approaches that, like with great humor and like sort of irony and like joking around, is really fantastic to me. And I was
Yeah.
really won over by that. Like at the beginning, like there's so many like weird and things that I think are like remarking upon um, larger issues in like American culture, just sort of like bubbling ideas under the surface and I don't know, it's shocking and weird and fun
Yeah.
in the first half, but I feel like it kind of loses me when it gets like a little bit more serious, and I think that like some of the like I wasn't necessarily in love with the interactions that happen in the bar and like with the
Yeah.
psychiatrist kind of going insane. I mean, I like that plot line.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary, but I feel like I think at a point it gets less satirical and more serious, and that's
Yeah,
what
and I
kind
was
of
all yeah, go yeah.
that's what held it back from being like a really like I think it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But that's what really held it back from being a great movie for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it had kept the tone a little bit more, I was hoping for a little bit bigger of a payoff. I don't know, like, I don't necessarily have an issue with how the movie ends, but I was just kind of hoping for a movie that felt so tense, and I thought pretty well written in terms of the like dialogue and the interactions, especially between the psychiatrist and the astronaut who goes insane. I just thought that it was like building to something a little more than it ended up being. And I don't know, it didn't all sort of come together for me. It's also not much of a conspiracy movie in hindsight. It doesn't really have much to do with like government cover-ups or anything like that. It's more just like a psychological thriller of sorts.
Yeah, it does.
And
Like
I mean, it does have to do with like obviously like Vietnam vets, and I guess it is a secret government facility that they are in.
the
But
critique does get like abstracted out into
yeah.
like the character stuff though, which
Hmm.
makes me like the significantly less interesting territory.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's where it loses me because I think like I don't know the great part about like while it is like similar to Pynchon to me, I was definitely getting that vibe a whole lot. Um, Pynchon will like hop around with characters, and it won't be about like one particular person or thing. And I think that that's what really holds down the second half of that is like getting into that more um I don't know, like psychodrama kind
Yeah.
of flavor. But it is good. I wanted to talk about executive action
Yeah,
now
I was gonna segue into let's talk about the ones we didn't like so much.
because executive action is the one I liked the least.
I
Um
probably agree with you, although I really didn't like Soylent Green very much at all.
I also don't like Soylent Green, which is why I haven't rewatched it. I didn't rewatch it for this because
Yeah,
I
I
knew
had
I
never
was
seen it, and yeah,
I
I could
I
take it or leave it.
knew I was just gonna not like it, and it's like in there are like some 70s movies that do like long takes but are like mostly in like wides, I feel like, or like
Mm.
medium shots to like show the set pieces of like sci-fi shit, and it's just like not particularly interesting because the effects nor the cinematography aren't very compelling. But that's not a problem. That's more, I think, vague memories of Soylent Green for me. But with executive action, I hated it because it was like all of the fun and like paranoia of like a conspiratorial movie just completely drained out of it. And it's just like you spend like 90 minutes following the elites plan the Kennedy assassination. And
Yeah,
it's just like, why do I give a fuck? This is the worst thing. Like it's I think the procedural like setup to it is neat, and I like that as like a framework for telling a story. But like if you're doing something in the conspiracy genre, it's like I want to be like sort of paranoid. I want to be in that mindset. It's like just telling you everything. And like a lot of the times like pretty explicitly like telling as
yeah,
opposed to even like visually showing.
yeah. It's a
And
lot of dialogue scenes of them talking about what they're gonna do.
like talking in boardrooms and shit like that. And then like when it's not that, it's like motherfuckers like practicing shooting to like get stuff right for like killing Kennedy.
Yeah, all the stuff with like the people who actually carry out the assassination, I like did not give a fuck about at all.
And it's
And
just
like,
it's the weird inverse of like a like conspiracy explained where it's just like if you were telling someone a conspiracy you had, I feel like this is kind of what it would be like, where it's just like these are all the facts behind it.
yeah,
It's not the exciting aspect of like uncovering something. Like with JFK, you obviously you know the conclusion, like executive action, but it's
yeah.
cool and like suspenseful because it's like you're discovering it with the characters. This is just you are being told every aspect of it, and you literally
And
know
then
the
it happens.
conclusion, and it happens. And wow, what a fucking surprise! Why
Yeah.
was I here?
It's like reading a Q post. Soylent Green, on the other hand, I don't even have much to say because I'm gonna be honest, I do not remember most of that movie. I watched it. You know, sometimes I have that happen with movies when I
The
watch them
zone
when
out
I'm like
movie.
when I'm very tired or whatever. But no, this was like the middle of the day. I was completely paying attention and everything, and I don't remember it. I can't even think of that many shots from it, honestly. Maybe it's because I knew where it was going, but honestly, like, even if you didn't know about the one line from that movie that anyone knows about, which is the reveal of the whole fucking point of the movie, kind of like Sixth Sense in that sense, where it's like the one thing about the movie that everyone knows is supposed to be the big twist that made it cool when it came out. Even if I hadn't known that, though, it's not like it's very difficult to know what is going on pretty early on.
Even beyond that, I think it's like in terms of why I'm less interested in it, especially as like within the paranoid political
It's also just not that
thriller.
interesting, like, filmmaking wise.
Like, yes, that 100%. But like, why I'm not interested in examining like it from a plot perspective of like political thrillers, is that it's like I don't like the future setting for it. Like, I think there is enough like compelling like contemporary corruption, and I feel like the I don't know, like using like sci-fi to examine like sort of political issues like that, like I don't know, loses me a little bit.
Especially
When
because they don't really fully commit to that. The post-apocalyptic world doesn't have that many wrinkles to it. You
yeah,
know?
that's I agree. I think it's just like not a very like well drawn world. I don't think there is are really um sorry, she's didn't go for a walk today, so
No,
she's gonna be a
don't
little annoying.
apologize.
But yeah, it's not a really well drawn like world that's interesting or compelling to be in. Yeah, the ones in the middle sort of just like made me question. It was like, why do I like this genre? Because I'm
Right.
like, because it's like these are like
Most of them are just fine
I gave them
as
I
movies.
gave them 3 stars because I was like yeah, they're fine. Like again, like generally less like compellingly shot than the Costa Gavras stuff. It's like the cinematography there really does a lot, and like the plotting in general is like really intricate. Like I think China Syndrome has like not the most beautiful cinematography, but again, that one like the narrative is like really tightly constructed and has a lot of good performances. Like
Lots of good sets as well.
yeah,
Production
yeah.
design.
I think with like 3 days of the Condor and Capricorn One, it's like not like great, like not shot really well. There's no, I mean, like 3 days of the Condor has like a central character, but both of those movies feel like looser collections of sketches
Yeah.
that like don't really amount to much. I
Yeah,
mean, I
both of
like
them kind of don't come together in any big way. They're also not very like shocking or intense to me.
I like 3 days of the Condor a little bit more because I think
Yeah.
it's interesting there. Like the performance. That's fuck. Is that Redford? That's Redford,
That's
right?
Redford, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think his character is interesting as like a
I
researcher for the CIA.
that's because that I like that angle of like someone in the CIA being like, oh wait a minute, this could happen here, like
Yeah.
the meddling like going on inside, and I think that like is an interesting like political point to examine and sort of go in. I think the way he figures out like he unravels the conspiracy isn't all that compelling.
Yeah.
Like
A
And
lot of it
it's
centers on that weird romance that he has, which I
yeah.
don't get.
I like the duration of time. I think is necessary for conspiracy because it like allows like sort of a degradation of like a paranoid mindset where you're
Yeah.
like living a particular way for so long that like you're involved in like I don't know, your mental faculties degrade, even if like a lot of the time in these conspiracy theory things they're like onto the truth. um I think being uncertain of what the truth is and like sort of that notion is what guides all of them. And like Condor and Capricorn One are less concerned with that unraveling. But I do think there are interesting and good stuff in both. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, Capricorn One is cool in its own ways too.
It has good chase sequences.
Yeah.
The air chase toward the end is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Good use of miniatures and like actual air stunts. The most interesting part of it for me was the console worker at NASA who noticed that the transmissions weren't actually coming from Mars.
Yeah, I like that, and like I like the initial reveal of like the astronauts
Maybe
like
that's why
look.
it felt kind of inert dramatically to me, because like the big conspiracy is kind of revealed like halfway through, and there's not really anything to find out after that. It's just kind of like, and then the astronauts go away because everyone thinks they're dead.
Yeah, and it's again where it's like inert in the way that executive action is with Elliot Gould's uncovery, because he's uncovering all stuff we already know. Like
Yeah.
it's like the viewer has seen the information, they know what like has to happen, and like what has to happen to lead to like a particularly like satisfying conclusion with it there and like discovery. And like Capricorn One, again, I think we mentioned earlier, like with there being like one thing that's a problem with like ending of like the endings of these movies is like if it's overly positive. And I think Capricorn One is like
Yeah.
to a really bad extent where
Yeah.
it's just like the astronaut comes back to his own funeral and it's like okay whatever, like
Yeah, it's
that's I'm
very schmaltzy.
and it's
And the
like
fact that you don't get anything after that, like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah no
that would
like
be fucking crazy.
what you
Like,
get after it would be so much more compelling because it's like then you witness like a government crumble like
right, that's, I
under
was
like
hoping, yeah, that's when like 45 minutes into it, they just told everyone the astronauts are dead. I was like, oh, well, this is gonna be cool, because obviously they're gonna prove that they're not dead, and then things are gonna be fucking crazy.
yeah
And
things
then
will
that
pop
didn't
off
happen at
again.
all. It just
Yeah.
ends right when he gets back, and it's like, well, I don't care. Like, that's not what I cared about at all. I don't care about this fucking astronaut getting back to his family. That hasn't been the point of this at all the whole time.
Yeah, that's like because I think it presents a very very exciting concept at the beginning where it's like
We're gonna fake the Mars landing.
yeah, we're gonna fake it. We just did that. We ran the numbers. We don't want to kill you boys. We can't. NASA can't take another failure, so
Yeah.
we got to fake this one. And like telling
Specifically
them,
for a profit reason. I do think that detail is good. That the ultimate reason is just like, nah, all the R&D guys have got too much money on like future projects, and if you guys blow up, which we know you will, then they're gonna pull out, and we can't have that. So
yeah, and that's like compelling, but I don't think.
But
like,
it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't really do
yeah,
anything.
that's another problem that I think you can run into with this kind of movie where it's like too high concept for its own good, where it's like they crush themselves under the weight of the like a very compelling premise.
Crazy cast in Capricorn One, by the way. You got O.J. Simpson for one thing,
Awesome, my
which I
favorite
did not
actor of all
know.
time.
I didn't know he was in it, and was very surprised. And it was like 11:45 at night, and Liv was in bed, and I was watching the movie on the TV, and I was like, "Is that O.J. Simpson?" And so
why does Liv sound like Marge Simpson?
no, that was me. I said that.
Oh, okay.
I sound like Marge Simpson. So okay, to close this out though, I think to talk more broadly, since we've been
About the
talking about the
genre.
individual movies, I think the thing that makes 70s conspiracy movies an interesting kind of movie, outside of what we talked about earlier, where it's like pop culture that is broadly anti-establishment, especially for the 80s, where there was stuff like that, but a lot of the most popular pop culture was very reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I think has grown into like a very sort of milquetoast, sort of center right, hyper normalized sort of apolitical politics.
Yeah, and anything like remotely like left-ish, like, because again, I don't want to give like any of these political thrillers except for the Gavras ones like a little bit more credit, and like I think Ninth Configuration and China Syndrome are like well thought out in their critiques as well. But like I don't know, some of the others like it doesn't. I mean, it's not a prerequisite for me to enjoy it, like having like a coherent like ideology that it follows through. But like I don't know, by merely like presenting like a generally left conspiracy does not make the film strong on its own right, and a executive action like proves that from the very surface.
Right. And that's what I was going to say, is that the thing with 70s movies that I think makes them a good thing to like think about is I think it's very instructive on something that you and I talk about a lot, which is capitalist realism, because this was like why are there some movies that take on this very broadly left wing, broadly skeptical of institutions, pop culture? Why are some of them just kind of whatever and not very well thought out? Now, obviously, I mean, why? I don't mean like, well, because of the director, blah, blah, blah. But I mean,
Yeah.
culturally, I think it's because at the end of the day, the reason that these were popular is because the idea that the government is corrupt, or that there are things going on that are shady and that we don't know about and that the government is lying about, was for the first time becoming like the majority view of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a market for that kind of stuff. And it reminds me, it's the same exact thing, which was happening around the same time as a lot of these movies, which is that the counterculture generation that was, in college in the 60s, the 70s was a process of that generation having those cultural sentiments sold back to them in pop culture. At the dawn of New Hollywood, and the music of the time and everything like that. And now, of course, we live in, a culture where that's a foregone conclusion, that everything is marketized and advertised. There is no, cultural niche.
Nothing is sacred.
Yeah, there is no counterculture, because everything gets, no matter how nominally anti-capitalist or actually anti-capitalist, everything gets subsumed into capitalism, where the only ways that we can express ourselves outwardly is through like consumer choices, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know Mark Fisher in Capitalist Realism talks a lot about Nirvana, and how Nirvana's music is very interesting because Kurt Cobain and Gen X in general was a generation of musicians who were recognizing that, oh, even if I make music that I think is communicating a progressive, leftist, whatever message, a message of a better world to envision, that that the world, and critiquing the way things are, the status quo, it doesn't matter how subversive it is, it doesn't matter how obvious it is, just because of the fact that I make music that people want to hear, and because of the way that you distribute music in this system, it's always just going to be a brand. It's going to be a product. And so it will never actually do anything. It will just be another choice of consumption for people.
And it's not like they ever felt threatened by it. Like, if culture actually posed like a legitimate threat, like, you wouldn't have those type of things. You wouldn't be allowed to interact with it. I mean, obviously, some could say like certain niche cultures are like that, are like niche and like off the beaten path because of that and because they're dangerous. But ultimately, I think like one of the long standing like conceits of the 60s that sort of comes home here in these 70s political thrillers is exactly that, like reckoning that like the 60s free love, like social movement and like a lot of the aims hippie movement ultimately wound up being more subsumed with like culture war stuff. And like that was when it came down to it, like the goals of the 60s were more cultural, or like people leading the 60s movements were more cultural than they were like economically redistributive. And I don't know. That's what we see at the end of the day, and that's why these movies don't change or do anything legitimately political. Legitimately politically, I mean, I think it's like interesting to examine and try and think about like why that is the case. Could there be potentially something that like changes or moves people to a larger extent? But I'm very skeptical of that, because it's like you can bring as many perspectives to the door and still like either not get it or get it and disagree with it or get it to some extent. And I don't know. It's like Armand White loves Jean-Luc Godard. Like there are reason you can see things with different views and still be impressed by it.
Chrissy Teigen and Elon Musk loved Parasite.
It's like, yeah, there's, I don't know, there are countless examples of it. But now I think it's like a reason why these aren't popular, why like political conspiracy isn't popular, and why I think like political media in general. I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about on here, like, um, at least like twice with, fuck, what? Irresistible and
Comey
the
Rule.
Comey Rule, is that
Golden
like
Globe nominated Comey Rule.
lovely. But that like the politics have become like so the hollow. I mean, I don't want to say hollow. I think there are like certain people in the 60s who like had more earnest belief and like
For
compassion
sure.
and commitment to these ideals, but like ultimately winding up to being very hollow in the 60s. Just you watch over generations how that spirit dilutes more and more
Yes.
and more and more until like the culture has become neoliberalism now, and that
Yeah.
is like thoroughly reflected in the mindset of like everything you consume. And that
Yes.
it's like either like trying to be apolitical and therefore like I don't know, exposing its politics in that way,
Right.
or just like when it is political, it's only about like surface level things like
Right.
contemporary art, or like not even art, like contemporary commercials, like acknowledging like Black Lives Matter or like
Yeah.
toxic masculinity. It's just like it's fucking selling shit now,
It's just
but
culture war stuff.
even less convincing, because
Yeah.
it's like you're not putting people who actually believe these things behind any of the messaging,
No, no.
and it's just like the politics are even more hollow.
I don't know. I don't have much else to say about it. I think we've
No,
talked.
we spoke our piece.
Yeah, said some good things about it. So do we want to say what we think the next one that we're gonna do
I
is?
I wholeheartedly think we should. I might even
Yes.
I can't wait for this one. And it's a lot
Yeah,
less
me too.
movies too. And a
It
lot
is,
higher
and
yield
better
of better
movies.
movies.
Yeah, much better movies. So the next one we're going to do on At the Movies, with Tim and JT. I guess that's what we're gonna call it now. is the Wachowski sister movies. We're going to be doing their filmography. I don't know if I'm going to rewatch Speed Racer and the Matrix movies because I just watched them, but all the other ones, I'll take a look at them, and at the end of the month, beginning of next month, we'll talk about them.
I'm excited to do this. This should be very good, and will certainly hype us up for Matrix 4 at the end of this.
Oh hell yeah!
This year.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for watching. Thanks JT for doing stuff with me.
My pleasure.
And yeah, I'll see y'all next time.